The dim light from my desk lamp cast a harsh shadow on my face. I was hunched over my laptop, scrolling through emails and browsing history. The sound of my kids laughing and playing in the next room seemed to fade into the background, barely registering in my brain. My mind was a tangled mess. My name's Dylan, and I'm 37. Just last month, I stumbled upon a truth that no man wants to face. Crystal, my wife of 10 years, the woman I trusted and loved, was having an affair. And the worst part, she was using work trips as cover to fly across the country to meet up with this other guy. He's also married, by the way. Crazy, right? But here's the thing, it all started with a stupid mistake. Crystal sent me a screenshot of some Amazon purchases she made for our kids, but she accidentally left in a delivery order to his place. So the suspicious husband and me started digging through her search history and emails. Everything was laid out in black and white. Turns out, that work trip in November wasn't work at all. It was a romantic getaway. But her recent trip was even more extravagant. A fancy spa resort with couples massages, a cooking class, and matching bathrobes with their initials from Etsy. She sent him a Christmas gift box a few days ago. Talk about sweet, bought him sexy lingerie, sent money via Venmo, and even planned a trip to Vegas in January. It was driving me insane, but I was trying to stay calm, trying not to explode. Crystal landed back home about an hour and a half ago. She said she'd text me when she arrived, but still nothing. I texted her twice, both texts sent but unread. That's when I started to feel something was wrong, so I decided to check our text history. Turns out, Crystal had been texting both me and this other guy during her layover. But that's not even the worst part. I checked her emails, hoping to find an Uber receipt from the airport to the hotel she claimed she was staying at. Nothing. That could only mean one thing: he picked her up. And here's the kicker, Crystal is in his state. Yeah, she flew solo to see this other guy. A few minutes later, I sent Crystal a photo of our son, hoping it might trigger a response. Still nothing. FYI, she's currently in the middle of the desert with this guy. The weird thing is, my message suddenly turned green, like her phone was off or had no service. It messed up my whole plan. I was going to send a group text to confront them both, but now I can't reach her. So frustrating. As I sat there, rage bubbling over, Sarah, my best friend, showed up at the house to help me process all of this. I can't believe Crystal would do this, I said, my voice shaking with anger as I recounted everything from the green text messages to my botched group text plan. Sarah sat down next to me, her face filled with concern. Did you try texting her again? Sarah asked. Yeah, but it's still green, like she turned off her phone or something. It's just weird. Sarah pondered for a few seconds, then said, let me try texting Crystal, just to see. I nodded, not expecting anything different, but I wasn't going to stop her. Sarah quickly typed out a message. Less than a minute later, she furrowed her brow, holding up her phone. My message just went through, it's blue. I paused, blinking at Sarah, and everything clicked. Crystal blocked me, I said, my voice flat. Sarah stared at me, speechless, but her eyes betrayed a mixture of shock and confusion. She blocked you instead of facing all of this? I nodded, my stomach churning. Yeah, she doesn't want to face the truth. Blocking me is her way of escaping. Sarah squeezed my hand, sighing. What are you going to do now? I sat up straight, regaining my composure. My next move is to call the hotel directly. I'll wait a few minutes, just to make sure they've checked in. Then I'm going to call their room. She can't hide forever. Sarah looked at me, worried but also understanding the determination in my eyes. Are you sure you want to confront this right now? Maybe you should think about it more. Shook my head, my gaze unwavering. Crystal has given me enough time to think. It's time to face it, whatever the outcome. Bing? Gathering my courage, I finally dialed the hotel number. The ringtone was longer than I expected, each beat pounding against my composure. When the receptionist connected me to Crystal's room, my heart hammered in my chest, feeling like it would burst. And then, a male voice answered. It was him, Crystal's lover. For a moment, it felt like someone punched me in the gut. I couldn't breathe. But I fought to stay calm, to suppress the rage that was bubbling up inside. Is Crystal there? I asked, forcing my voice to remain steady. And then, from the other side, her voice, so casual, so nonchalant, it was almost unbelievable. There was no remorse, no fear. Oh, he's busy right now, but I can take a message? That response felt like a punch to the gut. She wasn't even trying to hide it or apologize. Every word felt like gasoline on the fire of my anger. I gripped the phone, my fingers trembling with fury. Take a message? I gritted out, trying to hold my composure, but the disdain in her voice was unbearable. Tell him that I know everything. and neither of you will get away with this easily." I nearly shouted in a fit of rage, unable to contain myself anymore. The click of the phone disconnecting echoed through the room, but the anger still burned in my chest. The living room was eerily silent after that, but inside me, the storm had just begun. Just a few minutes later, Crystal called me back. I stared at the screen, my heart racing, but when I answered, the first thing I heard wasn't an apology. There was no emotion in her voice at all. "We need a divorce," Crystal said, like she was making a casual decision about what to eat for breakfast. "You don't have to fight it." I remained silent, waiting, expecting something. Maybe a flicker of regret, a hint of sadness, or at the very least, a sense of guilt. But no, Crystal was utterly emotionless. Her voice didn't waver, not a sign of remorse. It was almost comical. I had mentally prepared for a heated confrontation, for fierce arguments, but she was so cold. Part of me was shocked, but another part of me knew this was coming. All I felt was emptiness. So I sighed, realizing there was nothing left to say. No words could change what I had just witnessed. I turned away, surveying the house, and started packing up her things. Sarah, my best friend, had been there the whole time, silently helping me through it all. She didn't need any prompting, she just quietly got up and started putting Crystal's stuff into boxes. We worked in silence, box after box piling up. And when the last box was pushed out into the garage, I laughed a bitter, dry laugh. "Well, that's that, huh?" I said, my voice laced with both sarcasm and sorrow, pushing the last box out the door. Sarah looked at me, her eyes full of empathy. "You deserve better than this." I nodded, but said nothing more. Yes, I did deserve better, and maybe tomorrow would be the day I started over. That night, as the house fell silent, I sat alone. Every corner of this place was a reminder of Crystal, every item, every picture on the wall, every little detail felt like a taunt, a constant reminder of the lies she had left behind. The simmering anger in my chest finally boiled over, unable to be contained any longer. I stood abruptly, the rage coursing through my veins, making my hands shake. The pictures of Crystal and me on the wall, now just twisted memories, scars etched into my mind. I walked over, ripping each frame from the wall. The glass shattered against the hardwood floor, echoing the broken state of our relationship, fragments beyond repair. I didn't stop. This pain needed to be released, and the only way I could do that was to throw everything out of my life. I opened the closet, grabbing Crystal's dresses and shirts, flinging them to the floor with violent force. Everything crashed onto the floor, each item now a symbol of betrayal, fueled by my angry roars. It was all lies. I screamed, my voice booming through the empty house. The smashing continued, escalating into a frenzy. I punched the wall, my knuckles throbbing in pain, but I didn't care. I shattered the lamp in the living room, its glittering shards scattering as it fell, mirroring the shattered state of my life. I threw anything in reach, pillows, chairs, anything connected to her. The rage morphed into pure madness. So with each throw, with each curse that escaped my lips, I felt like my world was crumbling around me. Crystal had destroyed everything, not just our love, but me. I stood in the middle of the wreckage, broken items beneath my feet, my breath ragged, my heart pounding. While my tears wouldn't come, there was no room for weakness, only emptiness and a searing fire of rage. So the next morning I woke up in a chaotic house, but my heart was more broken than anything around me. So the faint sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting shadows across the living room, revealing the aftermath of my rage the night before. Crystal's belongings were scattered across the floor, picture frames torn apart, some things shattered into irreplaceable pieces, just like our relationship. I sat up, a heavy weight in my chest, forcing myself to take a deep breath to regain my composure. After a restless sleep filled with nightmares, my mind was a little clearer to reflect on things, especially the phone conversation from the night before. Crystal, the woman who spoke to me on the phone, was a complete stranger. Her voice was cold, emotionless, as if I had never existed in her life. It was both shocking and unsurprising. This wasn't the Crystal I had loved. But then the question that plagued me all night: who was the woman I had loved? Had it all been an act, a facade from the very beginning? The only thing she seemed to care about during the call was seeing the kids. I understood, and it wasn't a bad thing, of course. She wanted to see them. But what broke my heart was her refusal to answer any of my questions. No explanation, no acknowledgement, no remorse. Crystal didn't want to talk about what had happened, and clearly she wasn't sorry. I knew, in that moment as she picked up the phone and spoke to me, she was sitting next to her lover. If I had confronted Crystal here, in our house, maybe she would have been forced to face her true feelings. But over the phone, she was completely in control. And it made me realize that when she came home on Monday night, I wasn't expecting to see the woman I once knew. Crystal had changed. No, maybe she had always been this way, I just hadn't realized it sooner. What made things even more complex was that during the conversation with the guy, I learned that he had just separated too. The irony was brutal. 2 cheaters, 2 broken marriages, and now they were sitting there, comfy in the bubble they had created, while I was here, standing in the wreckage they left behind. I got up, surveyed the room, took another deep breath, and began cleaning up the mess, but I knew no amount of cleaning could erase the damage Crystal had inflicted. I picked up my phone and called my mom. It was hard, my hand trembled as the phone rang. Even though my mom and dad have always loved and supported me throughout my life, making this call made me feel like a failure. Even though I knew it wasn't my fault, admitting that I had chosen the wrong life partner, someone I trusted and loved for 13 years, was too painful to articulate. When my mom answered, her voice was warm and concerned. "Honey, what's wrong? You sound upset." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "Mom, Crystal is having an affair. She's left me." Mom was silent for a moment, likely trying to process what I had just said. "Oh, honey, are you okay? When did this happen?" This happened? I know. So, I couldn't mask the pain in my voice. "She's been hiding it from me, Mom. She's with him right now, I found out, and now I don't know what to do next. I feel like I failed." Mom didn't let me continue to blame myself. "You didn't fail. Don't ever think that. Sometimes we can't control what other people do, even when you've given them your whole heart." I sighed, the weight in my chest still heavy. "Mom, is this all my fault from 13 years ago? Why didn't I see her for who she was back then?" Mom gently replied, "You can't blame yourself for that, honey. Sometimes people change over time, and the bad things come out. What's important now is to focus on yourself and your kids. Everything else doesn't matter anymore." After the call, I felt a little lighter, but the confusion remained. I had 2 days to clear out Crystal's belongings from the house. That was the only time frame I had to regain control before she came back on Monday night. A million questions swirled in my head with no answers. Who should I tell? Should I call her dad? Or her mom? Her best friend? Even her coworkers? It was all so overwhelming and embarrassing. I wished there was a manual for this situation, but even with all the preparation, I still felt confused and ashamed. Sarah came over and helped me box up all of Crystal's stuff, filling the garage to the brim. There was one small bit of good fortune in this situation. She didn't take her house keys with her when she left. I was going to remove her key from my keychain, no need to rekey the locks. Everything would be ready for her when she returned. I stood at the garage door, looking at Crystal's belongings stacked inside, feeling drained, but also resolute. I had no plans to see her when she came back on Monday night. The door would be locked, and everything she needed would be there, waiting for her. The final emotion left in me was the cold edge of my parting message to Crystal. "Let your people talk to my people," I muttered with a wry smile, "and I'll never see you again." My friends and family are amazing. They've been there for me throughout this whole process, and I feel so lucky to have these people in my life. Yesterday, they came over, helping me pack everything that belonged to Crystal. Every piece of clothing, every piece of jewelry, and even the precious collections she loved, they were all carefully boxed up and brought out to the garage. It was a grueling process, stretching out throughout the afternoon, but I knew it was something I had to do to move on. Sarah, a constant source of support from the beginning, rolled up her sleeves and helped me organize every item. She tried to be gentle, but she couldn't hide her annoyance when she saw things that belonged to Crystal, especially the gifts I prisoned her over the years. "You're doing the right thing," Sarah said as we loaded another box into the garage. "Crystal doesn't deserve your patience or your love anymore." I nodded, feeling tired, but still determined. Honestly, I don't think Crystal could have imagined that I would be this decisive in removing her from my life. She probably still thought I would soften, would weaken, and want to reconcile, like in our past little arguments. But this time, there was no going back. Throughout the afternoon, we worked tirelessly, each item of Crystal's being separated from my living space, each memory sealed away in cardboard boxes. The things that were once part of our shared life now became evidence of betrayal, offering nothing but bitterness. As we boxed up the last item, my dad, who had remained silent throughout the process, finally spoke. "You know, son, you've handled this better than anyone I know. Not everyone has the courage to cut ties and move on like this." I just chuckled, a heavy weight in my heart. "I don't think it's courage, Dad. I think I just ran out of options." Dad patted my shoulder, his eyes filled with both pride and sadness. "That's how you keep going, son. You'll get through this." I looked back at the garage, where all of Crystal's belongings were now neatly packed, awaiting their eventual disposal. There was a sense of relief in me. It wasn't just the cleared space in the house, but my mind was slowly letting go of the weight she had left behind. I knew that this cleanup wasn't just about physical items, but a mental cleansing as well. Which item brought outside was another step away from her, away from the memories that had become painful. And as the garage door closed, I knew that I had truly begun the journey of moving on. Crystal's flight was scheduled to land before 10 p.m. tonight. When she grabbed an Uber to get home, the first thing Crystal would realize was that the door was locked. I was prepared for that. Crystal called me earlier today just to say that she would be coming to pick up her car and leave. Her voice was still cold, devoid of emotion. "I just need my car. No need to see each other," Crystal said over the phone, her tone no different from a business transaction. I sighed, keeping my voice calm. "Okay, your car is there, and your stuff is in the garage. I won't be in your way." Your way. I would keep my word. I wasn't going to make things any more difficult. But there was one thing I had never mentioned before this house. The house we had shared, the one Crystal thought would belong to both of us, was actually solely in my name. When we bought the house, Crystal didn't have good credit, so everything was put in my name for my teenage years. Health insurance, car insurance, cell phones, utilities, I managed everything. And now I think Crystal realizes that too. The only thing in her name was the car. I didn't want to exploit the situation or make things difficult for her, but I couldn't help but recognize that it could come back to bite her. My dad sat down next to me, his eyes filled with concern. "Have you thought about this, son? If Crystal has no ties to this house anymore, it will be much easier." I nodded. I don't want a messy divorce. I'm trying to keep my head in the game. If Crystal asks for anything reasonable, I'll listen and try to meet her halfway. Dad looked at me, nodding in agreement. "You're doing the right thing. But if she doesn't care, then you shouldn't waste your energy worrying." I chuckled dryly. Clearly, from the way she spoke on the phone, Crystal doesn't care anymore. She just wants to get her car and go. I looked out the window where Crystal's car was parked, so I'll do my best to not care either. Dad patted my shoulder, his eyes warm yet realistic. Sometimes not caring is the best way to protect yourself. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. This marriage was over. No more fighting, no more pulling at the strings, just a final deal to wrap things up like a business transaction. No more emotions, no more hope of holding on. It's been a few days since Crystal came home. Strangely enough, for someone who planned every detail of a secret romantic getaway with her lover, she had absolutely no plan for her return home. When she walked through the door, Crystal seemed to have lost the calmness and confidence I heard on the phone. The coldness, the hardness in her voice was gone. Instead, she seemed like someone running from judgment, flustered, like she didn't know what to do next. She's been living in the basement since Monday. I don't feel much emotion about Crystal's presence anymore. The anger, the hurt, it's all fading away, replaced by a hollow sense of detachment. I've allowed her to stay, but not because I have any feelings left, just for the sake of the kids. I want them to have as normal of a Christmas as possible, to be able to open presents with both their mom and dad on Christmas morning without being swept up in the chaos of the adults. Even though everything has changed, I still want to provide them with a sense of stability. But after Christmas, Crystal continued to retreat to the basement, as if she had become a separate part of the house too, and I knew that this couldn't continue forever. We've decided to try couples therapy. Even though we both know that the relationship is over, maybe therapy will help us understand things better, or at the very least handle things more calmly. Partly, I don't want the kids to be affected anymore, and partly, I need to know if there's any way to end this without causing more hurt. Right now, I'm sitting in the waiting room with Crystal. The silence between us is thick and tense. Neither of us says anything, but it's unnecessary. The air is suffocating enough. Every word right now risks setting everything ablaze, like a fire just needing a bit of wind to spread. I never thought I would be here, sitting with the woman who was once my wife, waiting for a therapist to talk about how to dissolve a marriage that has already crumbled. The door to the therapy room opens, and we're invited in. Crystal enters first, maintaining her usual stoic expression. I follow behind, trying to keep my emotions from showing on my face. "Hello, both of you. Thank you for coming in today. I understand this is a difficult time, so where would you like to begin?" I glance at Crystal. She still holds that cold expression, her eyes unwavering. I decide to be the one to break the ice. We've contacted 3 mediators and have an appointment next week to start the divorce process. To be honest, it's pretty clear that it's over. But last night Crystal said something that made me laugh uncontrollably. Crystal turns to look at me, her eyes flashing a bit defensively. Laugh? Why would you laugh? I was asking about reconciliation. It's serious. Serious? After everything that's happened, you ask me about reconciliation? It's absurd. I understand that might seem like an odd request, but could you share more about why you find it humorous? The therapist asks. You soy mine. I take a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure before replying. Dr. Crystal has been having an affair. She's been in a relationship while I had no idea. And now, when everything has come to light when we're in the midst of getting a divorce, she brings up reconciliation as if this marriage could be salvaged. Crystal frowns, a hint of frustration in her voice. Our marriage has been dead for a long time. It's not just my fault. Don't act like it's all on me. Is that so? That's news to me. If it's been dead for so long, why didn't you say anything before all of this happened? Hold on. Both of you are getting very emotionally reactive. Let's try to take a step back. Crystal, when you say the marriage has been dead for a long time, could you elaborate on that? Crystal takes a deep breath, as if struggling to find the right words. He was always there, but not really there. We haven't connected in a long time. I felt lonely, like I was living with a stranger. I feel the anger rising, but I try to stay calm. So, that's your excuse for having an affair? Instead of telling me how you felt, you ran to someone else. Crystal shrugs, not quite avoiding the question. I was wrong to cheat. But it wasn't just one thing between us. If we hadn't been broken before, I wouldn't have sought connection elsewhere. I hear both of you. This is a complicated situation, and maybe there were cracks in your relationship that you both didn't recognize or address sooner. If conciliation might not necessarily be about fixing your marriage, but about helping you both understand what happened so that you can have a cleaner, healthier break. I laugh again, but this time it's not because I find it funny, but because of the absurdity of it all. I don't think we need reconciliation to have a clean break. I've accepted that we're over. I just want a fair solution, so we can both move on. Crystal leans back, crossing her arms. I don't think we have anything left to say. That's what I want to explore with both of you. Is there something unresolved, or is it truly at an end? Coming to therapy today is a positive step to help you both understand where you stand. I remain silent for a moment, then look directly at the therapist. It's over. We can talk for the sake of the kids, but this marriage is dead if it wasn't before. It is now. Crystal doesn't respond, just stays silent, as if she's realized that there's nothing left to save either. I understand. If you both feel that way, then maybe clarifying the next steps will help you both feel more relieved. The conversation with the therapist continues for a while, but the main thing I realize is the confirmation from both sides that there is no going back. Reconciliation is just a different word for ending things peacefully, not for fixing something that has shattered. The truth is, Crystal's affair wasn't the result of some deep, irreparable rift. It was simply an act of selfishness. It was her way of escaping difficult conversations that she couldn't face. Instead of saying what needed to be said, instead of working together to find solutions, Crystal chose the easier path: betrayal. Couples therapy or even a formal divorce would have been too complex, requiring facing the truth and real emotions. But an affair, that was easier and more exciting. Really, we have to face it. Crystal wasn't just running from this marriage. She loved the feeling of being desired, of having two people in love with her at once, a way to control, to be in power, and to enjoy the thrill of crossing boundaries without responsibility. But I'm out of that game. I'm no longer participating in the game she set up, where I was always the one who lost. She won. And oh, Crystal was lucky, because this guy is a prize. A recently separated man, seeking comfort and solace in the arms of another woman, regardless of any values or loyalty. A perfect match indeed. And I have nothing left to hold on to. I've let go. There's no more reason to try to hold on to something that has been dead for a long time, a relationship where only one person was fighting, while the other was happily basking in the adoration of two people at once. I talked to Crystal very calmly about the terms of the separation. There weren't any arguments or fits of anger between us. I just wanted things to end quickly and cleanly. But the thing that bothered me most wasn't Crystal anymore, it was him, Charles, the man she had chosen. Crystal could go on with her life with Charles. I wouldn't stop her. But I was worried about the kind of person he was. I looked at Crystal, keeping my voice slow and steady. Crystal, I understand you've chosen your path, but there's one thing that doesn't sit well with me. It's Charles. I can't let him near my kids. Crystal sighed, looking weary. Charles isn't a bad person. He got caught up in this. I shook my head, not accepting that explanation. Are you listening to yourself? A man who is willing to cheat with a married woman with kids without hesitation. What kind of man does that without feeling anything, Crystal? I had called Charles last Saturday. We needed to have a conversation clear and direct. When he picked up, his voice was cold, slightly hesitant, but I didn't want to waste time. You know who I am, right? Charles was silent for a moment, then sighed. I know, so what? I tightened my grip on the phone, trying to stay calm. I have one question, Charles. Do you feel any remorse? Silence on the other end. An uncomfortable silence, lasting longer than it should. I waited, but no response came. You heard my question. Do you regret cheating on a married woman with children? Still no answer. I heard him breathe, but no words came out. It made my anger boil over. He didn't have the courage to take responsibility, and it drove me crazy. Do you understand, Charles? A decent man would know he was wrong and admit it. But you're silent. You don't have a shred of remorse? Still no response. And then a click, the line went dead. Charles had hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand, bitterness rising in my heart. Charles didn't feel a thing. No apology, not a hint of regret. That's the kind of man Crystal had chosen. A man who wouldn't take accountability, who would never admit his mistakes. And that scared me. I didn't want someone like that near my children. People who don't know right from wrong, who don't possess kindness or compassion, how could I trust him with my kids' lives? My family, recognizing the stress I was under, recommended Chumplity. Surprisingly, it actually helped me get through this. I've read half of her book, and the Chumplity website has offered so much valuable, realistic advice. Thanks to all of you for your support and being there for me. I can't believe the level of support and love people have shown me during this difficult time. Finally, to the trolls out there, the ones who think I was a bad husband or uncaring, sorry, but cheaters choose that path because they want to, not because I did anything wrong. I'm not responsible for their actions. If you've read any books or advice on dealing with cheaters, they all emphasize one common thing. It's not your fault. They made that choice, and you're not the reason. My steep's soon-to-be ex, Crystal, keeps insisting that our marriage was bad for years, but honestly, I don't think we were perfect. Not like Pam and Jim from The Office or Lucy and Ricky from I Love Lucy, but I still believe things were okay, that we could work through the bumps like any other married couple. Could I have been better? Sure. Was I perfect? Absolutely not. But my decisions and actions never harmed our marriage. For me, it was sacrifice, not irresponsibility. And now, as I look back at those sacrifices, I'm being blamed for being uncaring. It's so unfair. I always tried my best. I was there for her when she needed me. I held the family together, but it turned out that wasn't enough. Was this all just for attention? A selfish need to be the center of someone's love? Right now, Crystal and her AP affair partner are happily in their honeymoon phase, the phase they'd always fantasized about together. The romantic trips, the sweet late-night calls like teenage lovers, the lavish gifts, it all sounds great. But I wonder, what happens when the other shoe drops? What happens when he realizes that Crystal has little patience for kids? When he sees her walk past a sink full of dishes without a care? When the phone bill goes unpaid for 2 months because she spent all the money on frivolous, silly things? What then? That might not be my problem anymore, but it will certainly become his problem soon enough. Maybe one day he'll find himself in the exact situation I've been through for a decade. And then he'll have to face the question I've been grappling with. Will she be the glue, the one who tries to hold things together, or will she leave everything behind because of Crystal's irresponsibility? When she tells me that I'm to blame while she's cheating and spending money on someone else, I can only laugh. Maybe I'm at fault, but for what? For years of cleaning up after her, carrying the weight of her life? Maybe if I spent 2 hours a night having deep conversations with him about my feelings, things would have been different, but honestly, I'm glad I didn't. Looking back, I realize how little I was valued, how neglected I felt. All those years, I thought I was helping, trying for the family, but really I was being taken advantage of. And now, nothing has changed. Crystal has chosen her path, but in the end, the real burden will fall on the next man. One day, Charles will have to face reality the way I did. But this time I won't be the one cleaning up his messes. Yesterday, we had our first mediation meeting via Zoom. The meeting was actually pretty amicable, mainly because I didn't want to turn it into a pointless fight. I just wanted to get things over with quickly and cleanly. We both sat in front of our screens, trying to keep our composure. The mediator spoke slowly, trying to help us find common ground, but the tension remained. What struck me most during the meeting was Crystal. She didn't want anything. Not the house, not the belongings, not even her share of the retirement funds that she was entitled to. I leaned back, unable to hide my surprise. I looked at her through the Zoom screen, then turned to the mediator. "So, she really doesn't want anything?" Crystal simply nodded, her voice flat but clear. "I just want to be free." I raised an eyebrow, the surprise still lingering. "You don't want anything? Not the house, not the retirement. You know you have the right to ask, right?" Crystal stared directly at the screen, emotionless. "I know. But I don't want to prolong this. I just want to leave, take nothing." I was silent, not knowing what to say. Part of me thought she was avoiding something, but another part of me felt relieved. "If that's what you truly want," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "I won't stop you." The mediator looked at us, then spoke slowly. "I need to make sure both sides agree to the terms before we move forward. Crystal, are you certain about your decision?" Crystal simply nodded, not adding another word. I sighed, feeling a strange emptiness. I had expected more, maybe a heated argument, or a fight for what she thought she deserved. But no, she just wanted an escape, a release. I couldn't help but wonder if she was truly as relieved as she seemed to be when things ended, or if there was something gnawing at her from the inside that she didn't want to face. So regardless, I was ready. If you don't want anything, then I'll make sure everything ends cleanly and fairly. Throughout the process of cleaning and packing up her stuff in the house, I tried to give Crystal quite a few things, items she used to love, collectibles, and even gifts I thought she would want to keep. But she just shook her head, rejecting everything, as if those objects no longer had any meaning to her. It made me wonder, as soon as our marriage officially ended, would Crystal pack up everything else and drive straight to her lover's place to start a new life? I guess that wouldn't be too surprising. I had to accept that reality, even though I didn't truly want to be married to her anymore. But there was no denying that when I thought about her moving in with him, raising his 2 kids, my heart clenched. What about our kids? Would they be left behind, without their mom? The injustice of it made me furious. Crystal had told me she would never abandon her kids. She had insisted that history wouldn't repeat itself, because she knew that pain too well, that feeling of being left behind that her father had inflicted on her and her family. But now, Crystal was walking the same path she had hated. The thing she had claimed she would never do was happening. I had to accept that most of what Crystal used to say, her promises, the values she claimed to believe in, were ultimately lies. As we sat across from each other, amid the chaos of the packed belongings, I could only remind myself that the honeymoon phase between her and Charles wouldn't last forever. Real life would soon slap them in the face, and when it did, Charles would realize Crystal wasn't the perfect partner he imagined. Instead of a shoulder to lean on, he'd discover that she was more of a burden than a support. Her laziness, her irresponsibility, would quickly dismantle everything, just as it had with us. I laughed bitterly, then sighed. But of course, it wasn't my problem anymore. That would be Charles' lesson to learn, and I had already stepped out of that game. Still, I wished her well. But my kids deserved more. They deserved a mother who was present in their lives, not just for holidays like Christmas, Easter, or a week during the summer. They deserved a mother who was there for the most important moments, at their basketball games, their Boy Scout meetings, their birthday parties, and their school plays. And meanwhile, his other kids would have a mother living with them, and that was something that felt truly unfair. But maybe this was a lesson my sons would have to learn earlier than I ever wanted, that life isn't always fair, and we have to learn to face it. They would be stronger for it, and I would be there, always, to make sure they never felt abandoned. Crystal left this morning to visit her lover, and I was the one who told her to go. I didn't want to have to endure sitting with her and the rest of our COVID pod at a New Year's Eve party. I didn't need to see her face anymore. Crystal didn't argue, simply booking a flight out 30 minutes after I told her. My only condition was that she'd return before the weekend, since it was my birthday, and I really needed a day to myself. I had been watching the kids nonstop for 3 weeks while Crystal flitted back and forth to see her lover, so I thought I deserved at least one peaceful birthday to unwind. But then she texted me, right as she was boarding her flight, saying that she wouldn't be home in time for my birthday. I read the message feeling like I'd been slapped. She said that when she booked, she'd gotten a round-trip flight back for my birthday, but things had fallen apart. She tried to change her flight, but she was on a waiting list. It would cost $1,000 to change, and the only flight left was late at night. She kept throwing out these flimsy excuses. The funny thing was, Crystal seemed to forget I have the internet too. When I checked, I saw that flights back were still under $300, on the same airline she had flown. I texted her back pointing this out, but she kept weaving her story, claiming that those flights weren't available when she booked, another lie, and promising to figure it out. All I wanted was honesty. If she didn't want to be here on my birthday, just say it. If she didn't want to spend the day with the kids, just be straightforward. I can't force her to parent. But the most painful thing was that she didn't even try to pretend she cared. I told Crystal that the flights were still there, very affordable, and changing her flight was entirely her choice. I remember New Year's Eve. It was 12:40 a.m. Crystal still hadn't called. Rage bubbled up inside me, not because of anything else, but because I had to explain to the kids that even though Mom wasn't here, she would call at midnight to wish them a Happy New Year. I had trusted she wouldn't forget, but in the end, I was the one who became the liar in front of my kids. I still remember their faces, looking at me expectantly. They stared at the phone, hoping their mom would call, would appear in those first moments of the new year, but she didn't. Midnight passed in awkward silence, and I had to endure the disappointment etched on my children's faces. It hurt to see them so let down, and the anger inside me started to boil. In a fit of rage, I texted Crystal, hoping for a reasonable explanation. But the reason she gave just made me angrier. The kids are with their friends. I didn't want to bother them. I was stunned when I read that text. Bother them? Bother them? No, clearly she didn't want to be bothered during her amazing New Year's Eve. If I were her, if I was across the country on New Year's Eve without my kids, I would call. I would count down with them on FaceTime. I believe any parent who truly cared about their kids would do the same. But Crystal didn't. I texted back, furious. How could you say that? They were waiting for you. It's New Year's Eve. Is it okay with you to not call your kids? And her response drove me even more insane. If you told me I should call, I would have called. She was blaming me. She was saying that if I reminded her, she would have called. It was absurd. I couldn't believe what was going through her head when she typed that. Why should I have to remind you to call your kids at midnight? You're their mother. You should know that's a given. I sat there, stunned, staring at the phone, waiting for some kind of response. But there was nothing. Crystal was silent, as if she didn't feel any guilt or remorse. I realized that said it all. The kids, the family, weren't her priorities anymore. She didn't want to interrupt her perfect vacation with her lover, with his other children. And the biggest irony of it all is that today, right after that New Year's Eve, is my birthday. Crystal was supposed to come back tonight, but now I have no expectations. Right after that New Year's Eve text, I made it clear to her that we would talk on the 12th, during our next mediation. I was done. I was too tired to try to keep things amicable just for the kids. Crystal wasn't making any effort for them. I sit here, thinking that I've done everything I can, but I don't expect anything from her anymore. The past few days have been incredibly strange. Crystal and I barely talk, and that's something we both seem to be okay with. When we do need to communicate, it's solely around mediation, plans involving the kids, or practical issues. We maintain a polite demeanor, communicate well about these things, and even try to stay friendly in front of the kids so they don't feel hurt. Honestly, it makes things very odd. No tension, no arguments. We're simply cordial, focused on finishing the mediation and moving towards divorce. I find myself okay with that. But last night, while I was cleaning the kitchen, I heard Crystal talking on the phone in the basement. I guess she didn't realize one of the kids left the door open. Not wanting to get drawn into any drama, I was about to head down to close the door, but then I heard her telling someone, definitely her lover, about how crazy I had been acting. Crazy? I stopped dead in my tracks, unable to believe my ears. We barely talk, and when we do, it's been polite and clear. So what was crazy about this? Crystal continued to recount a conversation we had, and naturally, the whole story was fabricated. She said I had been acting insane, angry, crying, and that she had laughed in my face about my tantrum. What tantrum? I remember the conversation being completely normal, with no arguing or raised voices. The more I listened, the more uncomfortable I felt. And then Crystal went on to lie about my boasting about dating again, even recounting girls I was seeing. It never happened. Frustrated, I slammed the basement door shut. The sound was loud enough for Crystal to realize I had heard everything. I couldn't hold back anymore. I stormed down to the basement, looked her straight in the eye, and asked, "Why do you need to lie and make me out to be the bad guy? We're not together anymore. I have no reason to fight with you. That's why we're paying a mediator. So why start a new relationship by lying about the person you loved? Do you think that's a good way to begin?" Crystal was silent for a moment. She probably didn't expect me to confront her so directly. She didn't respond right away, and I could only see the embarrassment on her face. But really, I didn't understand what was going on in her head. I wasn't involved in her relationship anymore, and I didn't need her to love me or hate me. What bothered me was this other guy, the one she was head over heels for and might move in with. He only knows me through the fabricated stories Crystal has told him, and I'm certain it's all lies. If Crystal moves in with him, how can I trust that he'll be kind to my kids? I don't care if he hates me, it doesn't affect me. But the fact that my kids are going to be spending time with them over the summer makes me incredibly uneasy. How can I feel good knowing this man hates me based on lies and might not treat my kids well? I wanted to confront Crystal about this, but I knew I couldn't. Or maybe I didn't know how. On top of that, Crystal still hasn't told anyone that we're separating, and she's definitely not revealed the truth about why. She even told her own father that she'd be bringing the kids to visit him without me, because we're not on the same page right now. What? Clearly, she's still running from the truth, content to live in the bubble of love she's created. She's scared to face reality, or she just doesn't want to take responsibility for what happened. The funny thing is, Crystal hasn't found an apartment yet, not until the divorce paperwork is finalized, but she did book a date with her lover for Valentine's Day. She's refusing to face reality, and it's driving me more insane than ever. She can run from me, but she can't hide forever. Our final mediation documents are coming this week. We settled everything at our last meeting on the 12th, and now we just need to sign. Then, the divorce papers will be sent out and filed with the county. It'll all end with a Zoom hearing. I have to admit, there's a little bit of disappointment in the thought of our official separation ending through a computer screen. It feels less final, but it will get the job done, and finally, we will officially be over. Crystal finally has started looking for an apartment, but she still hasn't found anywhere she likes. I don't know if she's being picky or if she's simply comfortable living in the basement. Whatever the reason, the only thing that's clear is she needs to leave after the divorce papers are signed. I can't keep putting up with her living here forever. It's getting harder to ignore her presence. Lately, I often hear Crystal on the phone with her lover during the day, their giggling voices drifting up from below as a constant reminder of what happened. And strangely enough, I'm happy for her. No, it's not sarcasm or bitterness. I'm actually happy she's found an escape. As badly as things ended between us, I can still recognize that we weren't right for each other. Crystal might have reached her destination for happiness before I did, and that's perfectly okay. But it makes my life feel like it's in limbo. I'm still stuck in the past, unable to fully move forward because she's still here, in my house. Every time I hear Crystal laughing with her lover, I feel like I'm caught between two worlds, not fully divorced, but not married either. I really hope she moves out soon. A part of me suspects Crystal is aiming to be gone by February 1st so she can visit her lover for Valentine's Day. Frankly, I hope that happens for both of our sakes. That would be her deadline and my chance to start rebuilding my life. Crystal left this morning. As she walked out the door, she simply told the kids, "Mom's leaving," then vanished, leaving me with the task of explaining a few hours later that their mom was at work when they started asking questions. I've learned one thing through all this: I can't have any expectations. Just because I try to be honest with the kids doesn't mean Crystal will do the same. But even so, I'm proud of myself for not getting into any arguments or confrontations with her about leaving. True, a week before she said she was leaving, I did let my emotions get the best of me, but since then, I've tried to avoid unnecessary conflict. The only thing I asked Crystal for was her flight information just so I knew when she would be back. A simple and necessary thing. But no, she refused to give me any details. Maybe she thinks I don't have the right to know, or maybe she just wants to keep things to herself. Whatever the reason, Crystal has left and I'm okay with that. There's one thing that really frustrates me though. We discussed this so many times, and Crystal agreed that she wouldn't visit her lover until she had her own place. And then she blatantly broke that agreement. She told me straight up that she had the right to do what she wanted, and legally, she does, but her disregard still shocked me. We talked about prioritizing the kids and keeping things stable, but that doesn't seem to be a priority for her anymore. Crystal put a down payment on an apartment a few days ago, but then she said she wasn't sure when she would be moving. It's absurd. I have a feeling her decision to prolong her stay might be financially motivated. She's still paying less than the child support she'd be paying if she was living on her own, so this delay seems like a strategy to save money. I've tried to be accommodating, offering Crystal any furniture from the house she wants. I even offered to pay for half the cost of a new bunk bed for the kids, with only one condition: leave. I don't understand why she's so hesitant. But what truly infuriated me is something I just learned from a mutual friend who is also a former coworker Crystal's lover just got over COVID. When I say recently, I mean he was only cleared from isolation 3 days ago. And when I think about Crystal moving in with him, it makes me more nervous than ever. I wonder, what about his kids? Where were they while he was in isolation? Were they sick too? Maybe the kids were asymptomatic, but it doesn't make me any more comfortable. I feel utterly powerless thinking about the potential for my kids to get sick because of this. Crystal can do whatever she wants with her life, but when her actions could harm my kids, that's where I have to speak up. I don't know how to handle this. I'm so exhausted by her lies and broken promises. And now it's not just our own issue anymore, it involves my kids' health and safety. Now I have to wonder, did Crystal bring COVID home to me and the kids? It's an understatement to say I'm furious. She left without even telling me anything, completely unconcerned for the health of our family. This anger doesn't just stem from the emotional betrayal anymore. It's about her irresponsibility and her lack of concern. I can't believe she would take such a risk, not just with me, but with her own children. I can't accept this. My soon-to-be ex-wife decided to go run away on December 2nd and didn't come back until the 15th. While she was enjoying her amazing vacation, my family and I were dealing with a massive loss. We lost one of our dearest members to COVID. I was completely devastated, and all the people I love were in immense pain. On the 13th, when things got worse, I called her, telling her how bad it was. I remember that moment so vividly. On the other end of the line, I could hear noise, kids screaming. When I asked, she said she was out with his kids. Oh my God, I can't remember the last time she took our kids out to play, but maybe I'm getting sidetracked. Even so, I didn't expect her to care much about my terrible news, but at least she'd show some concern. I told myself maybe there was a sliver of kindness left in her. But that concern didn't last long. When she got back, she scheduled a COVID test, something I knew she had made a habit of doing after each visit with her lover. She scheduled it for 4 days after returning home, but then a massive snowstorm hit, making it impossible to get out. I understand weather is uncontrollable. Then, she said she rescheduled for another 4 days and then didn't go. I asked why, and she just said, I feel fine. I feel fine. Those words just kept echoing in my head. My family just went through a devastating loss to COVID, and her response was so nonchalant. I couldn't stop myself from questioning it. Maybe because Charles tested negative before she went, she felt safe, like she didn't need to worry. But clearly, nothing is guaranteed, and there was no way to be certain she couldn't bring the virus home. And then, it wasn't until Monday, the 3rd, almost 2 weeks after she returned, that she finally got tested. 2 weeks. I couldn't fathom her lack of concern. How could she be so reckless, so dismissive of the risk of infection, so dismissive of the loss my family had just experienced, and continue to live with such irresponsibility? The question didn't need an answer. I knew the answer, and even though I asked it as a rhetorical question, the truth was, I wasn't surprised anymore. She had chosen her path, not just in her feelings, but in how she treated her family, in how she treated our loss. It showed me more clearly than ever before. She wasn't here anymore, not in my heart, and certainly not in the hearts of my family. This lack of concern wasn't just about her abandoning our family to pursue a new life. It showed me that no matter how hard I tried to keep things calm for the kids, she no longer valued us. She had left, not just physically, but emotionally. The day Crystal is moving out is getting closer, and every day I can feel the shift in the house. Large boxes filled with new furniture are constantly being delivered, as if preparing for her new life. Every night, the sound of packing tape echoes through the house as Crystal cleans and packs her belongings. She's almost gone. Unplun. And me? I'm thrilled. It's strange to say this, but the feeling of freedom and liberation has made me actually start talking to Crystal more. Of course, we need to discuss child support and arrange visitation schedules, but now, the excitement of her leaving is something I can't contain. I've started asking her about her moving plans, what she intends to take from the house, and even the kids' visitation schedules. It feels like I'm a kid on Christmas morning. In a recent conversation, I asked Crystal if she planned to visit her lover. Not out of curiosity, but because I needed to know to arrange overnight and weekend schedules for the kids. But then, my curiosity started to take over, not for myself, but for my sons. I asked Crystal if she planned to let him meet the kids. She hesitated, and then replied, "Yeah, maybe he'll come to meet them." Okay. But I had a condition. I made it clear to her that before he met my kids, I needed to meet him first. Crystal was silent. I could see her thinking, or maybe trying to figure out how to weasel out of this. But there were no excuses. Why wouldn't I have the right to ask for this? Crystal looked at me, then asked, rather ridiculously, "Why do you need to meet him?" "Excuse me, what? You actually think I'm going to let my children spend time with a complete stranger without meeting him myself? I'm the one who interviews babysitters, who cares about every detail in my children's lives. Why wouldn't I want to meet him? I need to meet him to make sure that this man can be a safe and positive part of my kids' lives." Crystal looked worried. "You won't be mean to him, right?" I sighed. "You know me better than that. I have nothing to gain by being rude to him. I don't want you anymore. He can have you. Good luck." Crystal's voice softened. She knew that she couldn't stop me from meeting the guy. I had every right, just as she had the right to meet anyone I might date in the future. When it comes to my children, nothing is off limits. But I think, really, Crystal wasn't worried about how I'd treat her lover. She was scared of something else, the truth being exposed. She was afraid that this guy would realize that I wasn't the terrible monster Crystal had made me out to be in his eyes. The bad-mouthing, the scheming to make her seem like the victim would no longer work. I would meet him, I would be courteous, and he would see that I wasn't hurting, that I wasn't fighting with Crystal. He'd see that I'm a good person, that I love my children, and that I only want the best for them. And maybe, just maybe, he would realize that Crystal is the real monster in this story. So that night, after the kids were asleep, Crystal sat alone at the dining table, as if waiting for me to come and talk to her. But I didn't. Her drama was her issue, not mine. I continued my work, ignoring her presence, and when she didn't get any attention from me, she finally made a big announcement. Crystal declared that she had told everyone about everything between us, including her father. And then, something very strange happened. Crystal started to cry. Not regular tears, but ugly, ashamed, embarrassed tears. Talking to my dad, that was the first time he actually acted like a mother to me. I couldn't believe my ears. A mother. It was both bizarre and confusing. I don't know if her father had been 100% supportive, but if this was my son, I would definitely love and support him. But I would also offer some frank advice on how he messed up and could have acted better in the future. But Crystal seemed to have received only support without any critique from her father, and it made me feel uneasy. Something was wrong here. Then she went on to confess something else, as if wanting to unload her soul. "Last week was my youngest son's birthday, and I tried to get my dad to come. I texted him multiple times, but he didn't respond. Last night I learned that he was in another state with another woman, and I only just found out about my parents' divorce." I was silent, shocked. Just at the end of January, Crystal's father had filed for divorce after 30 years of marriage. Is cheating a learned behavior? Crystal's father abandoned her when she was a young girl, the same age as my oldest son now. Was she repeating what her father had done to her? I couldn't help but think about the patterns that are passed down from generation to generation, or maybe this was just a crazy coincidence. I couldn't help myself, so I texted my mother-in-law to verify. She confirmed they were divorcing. I asked if there was any infidelity involved, and my mother-in-law confirmed that, to her knowledge, there wasn't. But I knew better. My mother-in-law said that her husband started acting distant last fall, often picking fights for no reason and avoiding communication. By January, he declared he wanted a divorce to find himself. Find himself. A man in his 60s on the verge of retirement, suddenly needing to find himself. That sounds like a cop-out to me. But now I knew there was another woman in the picture, something my mother-in-law didn't know about. It was clear that in this family, irresponsibility and selfishness seemed to run in the blood. I considered telling my mother-in-law about her husband's affair, and I was going to. I just needed to gather a little more information before I spoke up. What I was facing wasn't just a personal separation, but it seemed to be a pattern of behavior, a legacy of betrayal and irresponsibility from generation to generation. And then it finally happened. Crystal left. The house was now empty and quiet enough to hear the echoes. The day she moved out, a moving truck pulled up in front of the house, and my kids immediately ran to the windows to watch. I tried to continue with my work, but I didn't know how to distract them from the spectacle. I pulled them away from the windows with the promise of a snack, just for them to sit down and do their schoolwork. But my youngest wouldn't budge. He stood there, staring out the window for 45 minutes as the truck loaded and Crystal drove away. After the truck pulled out, he finally left the window, his face sad. I went to him, trying to comfort him. "Are you okay?" I asked. He looked at me, his eyes slightly teary. "Is the truck coming back?" I was confused. Turns out, he wasn't sad about his mom leaving. He just wanted the truck to come back. I didn't know how to feel about that. Relieved he wasn't too affected, but worried that he was really okay. Just to be sure, I scheduled an appointment with a child therapist for both of them. As for Crystal's friends, they've started to reach out. After learning what happened, I received a bunch of messages, both on my phone and on Facebook, but I knew the truth. They were just curious. Maybe they cared a little, but most of them just wanted me to spill the secrets. Crystal hadn't been honest with them. She skipped over telling them about her trips to visit her lover during the pandemic. The interesting thing was, Crystal's best friends, they were shocked. They had always thought Crystal was some kind of ideal wife, but clearly they were wrong. What about my mother-in-law? I haven't told her the truth yet, partly because I didn't have all the confirmed information yet, but also because I think she's afraid to face the truth. Finding out that her husband was having an affair was a big blow, and it meant that she'd have to see him every day, live with the person who betrayed her. I understand that feeling, I've been through it. What bothers me is, why are cheaters always given the escape route of not confessing? Why don't they have to face the truths they've created? All I want is a bit of accountability from Crystal, but even that's too much to ask. I'll have to keep going, with all these questions and ambiguity, until I have enough information to tell my mother-in-law. Our world, now, is like a painting full of contradictions and pain.